Good morning. I'm Gassia Mikaelian.
And I'm Mike Meeback. Welcome to KTVU's special coverage of O.J. Simpson's parole hearing in Nevada.
Let's go ahead and bring in Adam Sostrin, a criminal defense attorney. You've been here in the KTVU newsroom watching. Very good to have you. We've been sort of taking our notes and making mention of certain things. I made a mention that this all looks like a bit of a dog and pony show. Some people have said their minds are made up. What's your read?
You know, it looks to me kind of like it's a DMV hearing, sort of pro forma. They have to ask a number of questions that are part of this Nevada.
Right, the age of your first arrest, that
form.
sort of thing.
Right, and you know, with that form, he can score. He can get 0 points, 1 point, 2 points. The more points he has, the worse it is for him. He can also get negative points for really good behavior, things like that. So they just have to ask these sort of basic questions to get through that chart.
Well, one moment you saw one of the commissioners actually hold up kind of the stack of letters, hundreds of letters, as she said, in support of O.J. Simpson, but also hundreds of letters hoping that he stays in prison. And she said at that point, they said, think about the 94 trial and the 95 acquittal.
Right.
Do you think they honestly will not consider what happened in his past, if this is strictly about what he has done in prison, his conduct, his participation in the multiple programs that he has?
It seems to apply to crimes, convictions, right? And there was no conviction with respect to the the trial of the century, so that's not going to be a part of it. And they said it wasn't. I think the big question mark was, was the civil proceeding going to come in? The fact that a jury found him guilty of wrongful death. It's not coming in. They said it. So that sort of set the O.J. defense team in this case and O.J. at ease. It should. It makes a big difference. If that's not going to be a part of things, it's going to be just this 11-point structure, some other factors. They want to hear what he's got to say. And that's about it. That's what they're going to be looking at.
We all sensed and really saw sort of a change in tone from Simpson about partway through the hearing. It was he was being asked about why did you go into the hotel room that day, and his mood turned a bit, and he said, it's been ruled by the state of California that it is my property. Sure. Up until then, and then shortly after that, we saw mild, genial, smiling O.J. Simpson. For that one moment, though, maybe I'm reading too much into it, we saw a bit of a different side.
I don't think so. I think we just sort of saw scary O.J. Everybody thinks that there must be another side of O.J. A lot of people have their opinions about what happened in that trial. Most people believe that he was guilty, although a jury found him not guilty. So that's not unexpected, but I don't think that one outburst alone would make the difference for the commission in this case.
How much coaching do you give your clients? Don't do something like that. Appear to be this way. Don't ever say. How much of that?
Well, if I'm talking to O.J. in this case, I think what I would probably do is mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa. I'm sorry, I blew it. Not to rationalize. I think we saw a little bit of rationalizing again. This is something that's sort of typical with O.J. He did that. I think that's a little bit of a mistake. I don't know if it's enough to make a difference, but unfortunately, I think he went into that part just a little bit too much, and I'm sure his counsel advised him, don't do that. Don't try to explain away these things. The court at the end of the trial said you're either arrogant or stupid. We don't believe that you weren't intending to commit a crime in this case. Just because it's your own property, you can't take your own property by force. That's the rule. There are recordings with respect to the event that happened in Las Vegas. So he shouldn't have gone so far out on a limb on, I didn't intend to do anything wrong. I think that was his big faux pas in this.
I've never watched one of these parole hearings live, so for the hour 15 that I was on, it was somewhat gripping. I thought toward the end when Bruce Fromong was on, I don't know how often a victim comes and gives his support to the person who is now in prison for 9 years for the armed robbery. Is that powerful in the eyes of the commissioners, especially when he says, hey, Juice, I'll be here tomorrow, to pick you up?
I think it makes a difference. You can hear, there's only certain parties that you can hear from at these proceedings. Of course, the commissioners at the proceedings, O.J., his defense counsel, family members speaking in support of him, and victims. So obviously they take into account what the victim has to say. And he says, I want this guy to get out. The interesting part of, though, is that he said that he had recommended to the prosecutor 1 or 3 years. Right. So the whole, one interesting bit of this is O.J. sort of went after his own attorney, saying, his own attorney, the offer was, according to O.J., just a couple years. He should have taken that deal. And O.J. being O.J., he went all the way through a trial, and now he got punished.
Let's take a look at what happens next year. Just to remind you, when the board took a break, it was about 11:16. They said we're going to deliberate for about 30 30 minutes. That puts us close to about perhaps 11:45-ish when we expect them to come back. We'll get a 5-minute notice before they do. I see the 4 members looking at this in 2 parts. How has he been up until now? And also, very importantly, what's he being released to? Talk to us a little bit about the people he might be with, the state he might be released to. What all is being taken into consideration there?
Well, I mean, when you get off on probation or you get off on parole, there's a certain things that you sort of have to abide by. There's certain rules that you're subject to, search and seizure, things like that. You have to know that this is what's going to be going on were we to release you in the community, and that's what they told him. It sounds like that he's going to be in Florida. He has a good friend, Scotto, who's located in Florida. I believe he has some family members here in California. And probably what's going to happen is if he's going to be moving out of state, the parole in Nevada, in a way, it's going to be sort of transferred to the jurisdiction of Florida, and they're going to oversee him. And he's going to have these requirements where he's going to have to report in. Perhaps he's not going to be able to drink because he did this, at the time of the offense, subject to search and seizure, things like that.
As he said, they're saying, did you complete that, AA course?
Right.
And, he completed some courses, but now it was a wedding. It was just having drinks. He defended himself, saying, I don't have a drinking problem.
Right.
If he is in wherever he is, Nevada, Florida, you heard him say during the hearing at the one point, I've had requests multiple times to do interviews and media. Surely that would come if he's paroled in the fall. Do you see him? Is it to his advantage to get involved in that side? I mean, when he first went to prison, Twitter was just kind of starting, and I don't know if he wants to make money or maybe he just wants to sit at home. Will the money even be there? Because he would have to hand that money over.
I think the media is going to come to him, like it does with so many celebrities. No matter what he wants, I think people are going to be going to him. They're going to go to him on the links, the golf course, and he does have a big payment he's got to make. So does he want to pay
Goldman families,
to the Goldman family? Right. And the interesting part, and you've probably heard about this, is the award was $33 million, and then he's sentenced to 9 to 33 years. Is that a coincidence? So he can, make that money by doing all kinds of things, although it would be extremely hard to hit that level. But he's lucky. He still gets this, my understanding, this pension with the NFL that's sort of untouchable. So he can keep making that money every single month. And the Goldman family, as sad as it is and as much as we all feel for them, they can't get to that part.
Let's go ahead and bring in our own KTVU reporter, Ken Wayne, who's standing by there in Carson City. You were watching just outside the room where the hearing was taking place, Ken.
Yeah, Garcia, as you know, they've taken their recess to deliberate what they've heard from this hearing, and so we expect within the next 30 minutes or less that we're going to hear what the decision is and if O.J. Simpson will be a free man. My impression so far has been that, O.J. seemed very earnest. He seemed sincere, and he laid out the case of what happened back in September of '07 when this robbery took place. He admitted that he made a huge mistake and judgment in error, and he wished it had never happened. He tried to make the explanation that this was his property he was trying to recover, but he said that he still takes full responsibility for what happened, and he just wished the whole thing had not happened. He apologized to the people of Nevada. But he said in his 9 years that he's been in prison, he's tried to be a model prisoner and do everything that was expected of him, and that he thinks he deserves to be set free, and all he wants to do is get back together with his friends and family and try to resume his life and make up for those lost years.
Ken, his oldest daughter, Arnell, spoke, and, brief comments, emotional comments, says he just, kind of wants Dad to come home. Did you feel that those were powerful words and that they came across as emotional and powerful for the commissioners?
I would think so. She seemed sincere as well, and she talked about the time lost that they've had as a family with him not being there, and she admitted he's not a perfect man. Those are close to her words, and that he did make a mistake, but that she thought he had paid the price for his mistake and that he should be allowed to return to his family. So, yeah, I think that had an impact. I would be curious to see what the impact would be on the last person who testified, which is that Bruce Famong, I think is how he says his name, who was the victim in the case. I mean, here's the guy who had a gun pointed at him, and he said that he's forgiven O.J. Simpson, and that they've rebuilt their relationship, and that he thinks O.J. was misled, misguided when he showed up with these two security people when things spun out of control. So he doesn't think O.J. Simpson really committed the kind of crime that he should be serving this kind of time for. He thinks O.J. made a mistake, but nothing with criminal intent, I guess, is what he was trying to get at. And so, you know, I'd be curious to think what I mean, when you have a victim testifying on your behalf as the convicted criminal, that's got to have some weight.
Yeah, and he made it a point. He said, O.J. never held a gun on me, right? O.J. never laid a hand on me. You know, almost with that exclamation, like, think about that when you deliberate here.
Right, and we're still going to be friends.
Right, we're still going to be friends.
Right, he
said and O.J. said he didn't even know anybody had a gun until after the fact. He said that the people with the gun were behind him, and he wasn't aware that a gun had been displayed or pointed at anyone until the whole incident was over. So, you know, O.J. has ducked some culpability here, and everything he said may be truthful, but at the same time, he has owned up to the overall event, that it was his fault that all of this happened. He took responsibility for that, and I think when you're a member of a parole board, that's what you want to hear. You don't want to hear somebody denying to the end, even after they've been convicted of a crime, that they had anything to do with it. O.J. did not do that. He took responsibility, said it was his fault, but he had wished it never happened, and he apologized for it. I don't know what more he could do, what more O.J. could do than what he did here today.
Right, certainly. I know one of the comments he made was 9 years away from your family. It's just not worth it. We were talking, and Ken, you were as well, about Bruce Framong's words, and I think it was after Framong left the seat. I think I saw O.J. Simpson appearing to wipe a tear. Was he getting emotional? Maybe, I don't know if you have any better read on that than we do, but that appeared the time that he became most emotional during the whole hearing.
Well, when Bruce said that, you know, if they decide to let O.J. out, he would be there, you know, ready to pick him up and take him home, and that he would hope that, you know, after their long friendship, that they would still remain friends going forward into the future. So I think, yeah, that said a lot about the level of their relationship, and at least from Bruce Framong's point of view, where he hopes this relationship will move into the future. So, yeah, I mean, if you're sitting in prison and the guy that had been a victim of your behavior is willing to take you and pick you up out of prison and take you home and be a friend with you moving forward, that's got to be pretty emotional and pretty powerful.
So we heard from Bruce Framong, Adam. We heard from Simpson's oldest daughter, his attorney, but no one who opposed it. No one was physically there in front of a microphone saying, I want O.J. in prison until we get another hearing down the road years to come.
Right. I think that's a critical fact. The fact that everybody wants him out, including the victim. And, you know, and obviously it's understanding that the district attorney thinks that it was sort of a severe punishment. They're not out to get O.J. It's time. O.J. got a significant sentence in this case. O.J. didn't have the gun. Of course, in California and Nevada, you don't actually have to have the gun to get charged with the gun. But the sentence was extreme. And just in that coincidental part, that it matched the jury's verdict in the civil case.
Yeah, you mentioned Steve Wolfson, top prosecutor in Clark County. I recently read something where he said, quote, in my opinion, most people who are almost 70 years old who have been model prisoners will be excellent candidates for parole. And Mr. Simpson fits that description.
Right, and on that point chart, I think you get it's a -1 that sort of goes in your favor. Any point you get goes against you, so a -1 is a good thing. He's been a model prisoner. I think we also heard sometime this week from a friend of his at the jail that said it is so impossible not to get one reprimand at the prison. It's almost like being followed by the CHP for, let's say, 1,000 miles, and you don't get a ticket.
I'll mention real quick, yesterday we had a poll, KTVU question of the day, which was, do you think O.J. Simpson should be granted parole? It was more against being granted parole than it was in favor. And a lot of people in our comments were writing, look what he did to Nicole Brown Simpson and to Ron. So that is certainly weighing very heavy in people's minds. I'll mention quickly, the Goldman family is not part of this hearing at all, but they have issued a statement saying they feel apprehensive about how this will change their lives again should Simpson be released. So certainly this sort of peels back. And if I can actually maybe bring in our own Ken Wayne, because Ken, if you're there, he covered the O.J. Simpson murder trial extensively during your time here at KTVU. You were in L.A. for weeks and weeks at a time. Certainly you understand how this sort of, peels that scab right off that old murder trial in a number of ways.
I had a chance to talk to Ron Goldman sometime after the trial, after O.J. Simpson was found not guilty. And I tell you, I mean, it just breaks your heart to talk to him. You can see the pain and anguish in his eyes. You hear it in his voice. And I think that's still true to this day, even though that trial was 20-something years ago. So, yeah. And the interesting thing is, you were just talking about how nobody came out to argue to keep O.J. Simpson in prison. That opportunity was there. That's open. Anybody can apply to come here and testify that O.J. Simpson should stay behind bars, and nobody did that. But you did see the commissioner hold up the ream of papers from all of the letters and emails and messages that they received from people who were against O.J. being released. And she indicated that almost all of those had to do with the murder trial in Los Angeles. That is not part of this case. They're completely separate issues. That has nothing to do with this parole hearing. And she said those won't be considered because that's a separate case. He was acquitted. He had no criminal record prior to what happened in Las Vegas in 2007 and this robbery. So nobody came forward that could testify addressing that issue, the robbery in Las Vegas, as to why O.J. Simpson should stay behind bars. I think that was an interesting thing to note.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Ken, I know we got to let you go because we're halfway through deliberations here, but just to kind of cross our T's and dot our I's, if it's 4-0, he's paroled. Right. If it's 3-1, that's when they go down to Vegas and bring in 2 other commissioners for a vote?
Right. They'll put them on the phone. They'll have a conference call. And those 2 people in Las Vegas will be able to vote as well. So the bottom line is they need to have 4 commissioners. Right now there are 6. There's supposed to be 7, but there's a vacancy. So 4 of those 6 need to vote in favor of O.J. Simpson being paroled for that to happen. These 4 here in Carson City, if it's unanimous, that's the end of it. They will vote. If they say, yes, he should be released, then that process will start, and O.J. Simpson could be released as early as October 1st. But if they're short of 4, they bring in the 2 Las Vegas people on the phone today. It's going to happen today, so we'll know one way or the other, and then they'll have another vote. And then if they get, depending on how many vote in favor here and how many vote in favor in Las Vegas, still got to get that 4, then O.J. would be set free. If it's a tie, then they're going to have to wait 6 months until they get that 7th commissioner on the board to fill that vacancy. Then in 6 months, we'll go through this process all over again and find out if then O.J. would be released. And if they're all against it, then O.J. stays in prison. And, conceivably, he could stay in prison until the year 2022. But right now, it looks like, and everybody that's been talking about this seems to agree, O.J. Simpson will be released. All
right, Ken Wayne, live there in Carson City. We'll check in with you, Ken, after we hear from these commissioners. The first thing we saw from O.J., too, is interesting to know when he walked in. I mean, he's 70 years old. We hadn't seen him in a few years.
Right.
He was wearing the traditional blues, the white T-shirt underneath. I thought he looked a little thin compared to when we saw him in 2013. Yeah. But the personality or the way he held himself seemed similar to what he has in the past.
But it's my understanding, I guess he's sort of been trying to lose weight, get a little bit in shape, because he expects to be released and go out in the public and presumably be a little bit out in the limelight again.
As we see this again, taped from about an hour and a half ago, we saw him walk in, take a seat. Again, the first thing he did was give his prisoner number. Let's listen back for a moment now to the opening statement that he first gave during his parole hearing. Let's play that for you now.
Are you humbled by this incarceration?
Oh, yes, for sure. As I said, I wish it would have never happened. I was going to start, I didn't know how we were going to do this, by apologizing to the people of Nevada, because I wish this would have never happened. I apologized to him at my sentencing. You know, there's nothing I can do about this kind of media circus that's going on right now, but I could do something about the whole thing in the beginning. If I would have made a better judgment back then, none of this would have happened. And I take full responsibility, because I should have never, you know, I haven't made any excuses in 9 years here, but I should have never allowed these alleged security guys to help me, because it turned out they were only trying to help themselves. If they weren't there, Bruce and I, we tried to do this. We tried to sit down in the room and call this guy Mike Gilbert and discuss it all, but these guys took over and we were unable to do that. If we were able to do that, you would have never heard about this. None of us would be here today.
Part of O.J. Simpson's first initial recount, apology. We've heard him say, I had no intent to commit a crime. But then we also said at the very end, he said, I'm a convict. He said, do your time and don't do anything to extend your time. That was his goal going into prison.
That's correct. He's got to be a model prisoner. Do it perfectly. Even sent that letter. Who knows if that was premeditated to the assemblyman. O.J. wanted to make sure that he could get out, not have to serve the entire, obviously, the 33-year term. He wouldn't serve that. It's a percentage of it. Yeah. As you just heard, he would be getting out in 2022. That's sort of how it works. You don't do 100% of your sentences. But O.J. certainly wanted to do the least amount that he could do. He was up for parole, as we know before, and he got off on 5 of the offenses, but they weren't statutorily eligible to talk about the additional 7 until today's date. So the earliest that he could get out would be October 1st. He's got to be perfect. That's the plan.
I thought it was interesting. You heard him kind of talk about how I didn't know really what I was getting myself into. I didn't want to commit a crime. You know, I was just there to get my stuff. And then when he was talking about the courses that he's completed while in prison, I think one of them was called victim empathy. But then the one commissioner asked him, well, which was your favorite? Which is the one you think you got the most out of? And he said, you know, alternative to violence, something different other than violence. And when he said, I didn't even want to commit violence, but that wound up being his favorite course. So I guess the question, Adam, is, you know, these commissioners are asking themselves, will he reoffend? Right. And when the prisoner says my favorite course was, you know, alternative to violence, you know, and he talked about breaking up fights in the yard and trying to be the peacemaker, and maybe that'll hit with him.
Oh, I think that's sort of how O.J. sort of feels like he's perceived by everybody else. Everybody thinks that O.J.'s a violent person, so clearly he wanted to emphasize the point to the commissioners that, no, I abhor violence, I enjoyed this course, I excelled at it, whatever I can do, you don't have to be violent, I know how to handle, different types of situations, so the idea is, when I'm out, you're not going to hear any bad conduct about me.
Well, so not to be negative, but after the acquittal on the murder charges, many people were very surprised to see this pop up saying, if I got off like that, I would have kept my nose clean, I would have been a model citizen, I wouldn't have gotten into anything even remotely like what's happened in Vegas.
Sure, he got a new lease on life. He was the luckiest person with the amount of evidence that they had in this case. I mean, I've had cases where there's certainly significant less amount.
And you're referring to the murder trial?
Referring to the murder trial. Any kind of trial that I've had where there's even less evidence, and then my client can still get a conviction. Now, he's a very lucky person, but I think O.J. being O.J. in a way, and I think we all think, he can get away with a lot of things. Here he was, he's been celebrated his whole life when he was young. He was an athlete. He was so popular. He got all these endorsements. He was the Hertz guy. He was in the Naked Gun commercials. I think O.J. probably perceives himself in a way that a lot of us don't.
This is ego, this is celebrity, perhaps it's a bit of the American public
but I think
being drawn to him.
Don't you think he thought, the way he sounded, he was defending himself like, I was staying clean. I was in Vegas for a wedding. And then Bruce Fromon, when he spoke, he said, I felt O.J. was misguided during that night at the hotel.
I think OJ
Whether it's
was
true or not, I don't know. But, you know, it's not like he was looking for trouble.
But when you're presented with a stupid idea, you should know to say no.
True.
And I think OJ just sort of always wins and always gets away with things, and that's been the nature of things. And, you know, obviously he won this trial that other people probably wouldn't win, so he could probably get away with this too. That's what I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
We talked about Arnell Simpson, his oldest daughter, giving the emotional testimony there. Let's play a little bit of what she had to say.
No one really knows how much we have been through this ordeal in the last 9 years. Excuse me. My experience with him is that he's like my best friend and my rock. And as a family, we recognize that he is not the perfect man, but he's clearly a man and a father who has done his best to behave in a way that speaks to his overall nature and character, which is always to be positive no matter what.
So we know that Simpson, or through his attorneys, requested to live in Florida. If he is paroled, do you think they would lean that way, or would he have to stay in the state of Nevada for a certain amount of time?
As long as he can show that there's going to be a stable environment, a support structure.
In Florida?
In Florida, I think there probably wouldn't be an objection to him going there. Again, this is a person who's never had a criminal conviction, like it or not, right? This is the only one that he's had. He's been a model prisoner. I don't think that there would be opposition to it.
Can I go back for a minute to what we saw with his daughter, Arnell? She became very emotional. It was striking to me that her dad is about as close to her as we are now. The urge to hold his hand, to pet his shoulder, none of that is allowed.
Sure. Well, that typically happens in criminal proceedings. You're a prisoner. You can't touch or hold on to anybody. That's just
how it is. So he's being treated like everyone else.
He's being treated, well.
Yes. Even he laughed at that suggestion when one of the parole commissioners said, we want you to know this is just, you know, what everybody else gets. And he said, no, you know, we all laughed. That
right.
certainly can't be the case.
And that's sort of a theme, you know, has OJ been treated like everybody else? But it's an interesting question because everybody else doesn't have a double murder that they were acquitted of. So in the sense, maybe in that sense, he's being treated like everybody else who would have that kind of a background. Of course, I don't think the sentence that he got, maybe I'm going a little off subject, I don't think that that justice was really done with respect to the 33 years, and I don't think most people do.
If you're just joining us, we are in the midst of the O.J. Simpson parole hearing. The first part lasted about an hour and 15 minutes. We are currently in recess as the 4 commissioners do their deliberations, and I don't know if this is not live. Well, this could be a live picture, and O.J. Simpson back inside the hearing room awaiting their vote. If it's a 4-0 vote, then O.J. Simpson is paroled. And Adam, when that happens, the earliest he can come out is October. So what changes for O.J. Simpson from today to October? I mean, is he moved to a different part of the prison? Or does it just stay the same?
Correct. I mean, he could end up going to Clark County. It's my understanding that the prison's about 40 miles away
to
from
the jail.
Right before
there.
He gets transferred. And then October 1, that's when he's out.
So when would he be transferred if this happens? Like, is it a tomorrow morning? Is it?
You know, it could take maybe
paperwork.
a week, 10 days, paperwork, things like that. He will be transferred to another facility, then he'll be released.
Just to remind people, Mike, you touched on this. At this point, we are a half an hour out of where they said that the parole board took a break. They said we expect to take about 30 minutes to deliberate. We've just hit that 30-minute mark. We do know we will be getting a 5-minute warning. We've not been given that 5-minute warning. So, you know, we had our KTVU political expert on, political analyst the other day, and he said that the parole board can't come back so quickly that it looks like they didn't consider anything they'd heard. They almost have to stay out for a little while to at least make it look like they're making their decision. It is widely expected that he'll be granted release.
Right. It's sort of an uncomfortable thing. This is such a not a celebrated case. This is a very infamous situation with respect to OJ and his prior case, and to be the person who sort of signs off, I understand within that 30-minute period, that's sort of that's uncomfortable, and I get it. But if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, if he's considered to be a minimum risk offender, which was the same thing in the previous hearing, and nothing has happened since, there hasn't been anything that would detract from that. There's no reason that they wouldn't come back, I guess, in the 30 minutes. I guess they'd be analyzing the things that OJ said. And if he really is sorry for what occurred, those are sort of, I guess, some of those other factors that they could look at.
Earlier on Mornings on 2, Adam, Ken Wayne was reporting from outside the hearing room, and he said that he did an interview with a radio station from Ireland. I mean, there's been hundreds of credentials issued for this particular parole hearing from around the world. How in the world do you think he's going to live if he says he just wants to live quietly? How do you do that? Do you think he will be able to do that?
Well, I think he's getting $25,000 a month as part of what he receives from the NFL. I think he could probably figure out how to live as privately or reclusively as he wanted. Of course, he is an infamous celebrity. People are going to be wanting to come to him to take pictures and all kinds of things. Casey Anthony had to figure out a way around it. OJ may attempt to do the same thing, but a lot of people think that OJ is just going to be OJ. You heard
that he's just eventually gonna
go back like a moth to a flame almost.
Yeah, like a moth to a flame. That's what the guys were saying who were involved with the Las Vegas incident. No. OJ's going to be OJ. So yeah, the question's sort of up in the air. I think he'll want a little bit of limelight. I can't imagine that he'll want to just escape from all.
So that personality you don't think has changed at all in the 9 years in prison?
People think OJ's OJ. Do you think an old dog can learn new tricks? I mean, OJ says that he can. He's 70 years old. He's had a life where he's been involved, around celebrity and things like that. Just to give that up, it's sort of hard to imagine. I think other people who got a reprieve like that might say, okay, I'm done. But the question is, will OJ be OJ? And the people who know him best seem to think that he's going to want a little bit of that limelight.
Yeah, I was reading a lot of comments from the parole board leading up to this, and everything that they were writing in answer to media questions essentially made it sound like we want to get this over with. We want to move on to business as usual. This is atypical in almost every way, judging by the number of reporters that are there, the very procedure that's playing out on TV today. So you get this real sense from the parole board of like, let's just get this over with.
Right. But I think they're trying to say that, here we are, we're these objective fact finders.
Actually, you know what? And I do hate to interrupt, but I think we could be just seconds away. Oh, no, we'll go ahead and...
wait till they get settled here.
You were saying that this is atypical.
Right. I think the parole people want everyone to think that they're not treating this case any differently than they would any other case. They're tired of the media.
No kid gloves.
Just the law and the facts. That's all we need. And that's sort of the appropriate way to behave.
Okay. As we did mention here, we are just showing you a live picture of the 4 parole commissioners taking their seats. They were out for just about 35 minutes.
Okay.
We do expect to hear from them momentarily. They're sort of getting situated, logged into their computers. O.J. Simpson, we just showed you a live picture on the other side via video feed from the Lovelock prison.
All right, hitting the gavel. Remember, it has to be a 4-0 vote in order to be paroled. Let's listen in.
James Simpson back into order. Are we ready to vote, folks?
Chairman Bisbee, I'll start off. Mr. Simpson, you organized this crime in which 2 victims were robbed at gunpoint. It was a serious crime, and there was no excuse for it. You deserve to be sent to prison. You've been in prison now almost 9 years, the minimum amount imposed by the court. You have complied with the rules of the prison. You have programmed in an acceptable manner. You have no prior conviction of criminal activity. You are low risk to reoffend on our guidelines. You have community support and stable release plans. We've heard from you and from your victim. The question here, as with all parole hearings, is whether or not you have served enough time in prison on this case. Considering all of these factors, My vote is to grant your parole effective when eligible.
Thank you.
And I concur with Commissioner Korda and grant parole. And in addition, our decision, although difficult, is fair and just.
I concur with Commissioner Korda and agree to grant parole.
Mr. Simpson, before I cast my vote, I want to let you know that we believe that we're a fair board. We believe that we're a consistent board. I will let you know that consistency also goes to parole, and we do not look kindly upon parole violations. And if I cast my vote to grant and it concludes the hearing, our expectation would be that you not violate even the simplest condition of parole. Having said that, I am prepared to cast a vote. I am prepared to ask the commissioners to set conditions. If that happens, we will produce an order sometime in the next 15 to 20 minutes. That will be faxed to you or presented to you at the institution, and it will become a public record. So based on all of that, Mr. Simpson, I do vote to grant parole when eligible, and that will conclude this hearing.
Thank you.
A great deal of emotion, certainly relief. We have just learned that O.J. Simpson will, in fact, be paroled in October. As we heard each commissioner explain why they're saying that they are granting parole, we could see the relief growing in his own face. He became emotional. He's clasping hands, speaking. I don't know if that's to his daughter or to the commissioners themselves. There you have it. O.J. Simpson will be a free man after almost 9 years in prison. Come October, he'll be walking out a free man. Commissioners making it clear he complied with the rules. He has no prior convictions, considered a low risk to reoffend, but also making it clear that from now on, he has been a model prisoner. He's now expected to be a model citizen.
Don't even sniff anything that could send you back to prison. Any surprise here with this vote?
No, like we were discussing before, I don't think there was any surprise because nothing changed since the last commission vote. He continued to be a model prisoner, and with the statement from the victim, with the statement from his daughter, things like that, it was sufficient to release him on parole. So I don't think it was totally unexpected. No.
And again, he walks out the door there after his thank you in the room, and he goes back to his cell. And what's the earliest you think he may go down to Clark County, if that's where he is going to go?
I can't say. Of course, there's a number of things they have to go through before they're able to transfer him. They're going to send him back, then they're going to transfer him back at some point, probably to Clark County. Within a reasonable period before the October 1 release date.
But as of right now, he's still life behind bars. He can't see his daughter who's there to see him. There's none of that.
His daughter can still see her father.
During regular visiting hours.
During visiting hours, but he's still a prisoner until he's released.
Did I miss something in regards to Nevada or Florida where he would, is that?
I don't think they made clear, did they?
I don't think they made a statement regarding where he was going to be continuing to reside. But they did say, though, that it appeared that he had a stable environment for him in Florida.
In the state of Florida.
So I'm assuming that that's going to be that's accepted by them.
Okay, but once again, the breaking news we brought to you, you just heard it live. O.J. Simpson will be released on parole in October, 9 years behind bars for an armed robbery that took place in Nevada. We're going to stay on top of this breaking news, bring you more. We have reporters at the scene. Stay with us because essentially our new newscast is about to start. Again, the headline, O.J. Simpson granted parole.
Adam, thank you.
Well, thanks for having me.